So for those of you who were with us last week, it was pretty terrific, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's so hard to believe that we're 16 years old. I look back and think, oh my goodness, where did time go? So Carol's homily and the discussion that we had afterwards made me think we should continue the conversation a little bit more this week. And it was interesting because our gospel today, which is a veritable parable salad, lends itself for further discussion. So here we go. So those of you who know me know that I am a weed aficionado. So weeds by far constitute the largest ingredient in our parable salad. And I don't know about you, but back in the day when I heard this gospel in church, I came away and I would think about the bad seed. Any of you of a certain age remember that movie, The Bad Seed? It's really kind of scary. And so I came away with the idea that some people were just bad. And we all knew who those bad people were. They were heretics. They were people that didn't believe like we believed. They were those people who had sex before they got married. So you can add anything in there. But they certainly weren't us because we were faithful. And Satan was indeed that enemy who planted these noxious blooms. And all we wanted was for those people to go away, preferably to hell, because that's where the line go to hell came from, right? And Jesus is going to accommodate our wishes, right? At the end of time, or maybe remember there was the particular judgment and then the general judgment at the end. Well, the truth of the matter is, talking to someone, as I said, who is intimately acquainted with weeds, that weeds are just weeds. And to me, they grow from spontaneous generation rather than from the ill intent of a well-placed enemy. They are annoyingly commonplace, and earth is filled with them. And you have to learn to live with them and tolerate them, or it will drive you stark, raving mad. Spoken by somebody who has OCD. Not bad, but you can trust me on that. So the second ingredient in our parable salad is the mustard trait. So I did a little bit of research because I knew nothing about a mustard trait, and it is not a weed that proliferates as wildly as did the crabgrass and other unmentionable weeds that commandeered my garden during the 10 days that I couldn't work after I had my eyelid surgery. So anyway, it takes some years to grow into a life-giving tree that feeds the birds and the animals with its sweet fruit and its tasty leaves in a very arid countryside. So I would like to think that we at St. Mary Magdalene are like the mustard tree. We have spent the last 16 years growing slowly and organically into what we are today, a shelter for those who have found themselves often in a desert searching for spiritual sustenance. Many of us, as Peg mentioned last week, were law-abiding Catholics who left the church after much thought and anguish because it just no longer fed us. So what was a core member of St. Mary Magdalene? We all met independently at the Church of the Beatitudes, which was an old Catholic church. And we left that as a group. We came independently, but we left as a group because the pastor, unfortunately, remained attached to the master's tools and the master's blueprint. And we could not build a discipleship of equals in that kind of a community. So about 10 of us, now wounded by both the institution and the Church of the Beatitudes, we founded the community of St. Mary Magdalene altogether. And from our humble, and I have to say quite painful beginning, because in the beginning, it was even hard to talk about it. You know, here you were like something new and different, and like you couldn't get your act together to stay together. It was very painful. But anyway, we all learned what not to do if we were going to build the beloved community. So we, the community of St. Mary Magdalene, were an offshoot of the Church of Beatitudes, which is an offshoot of the institutional church. And we would not exist without either of them. And we would also not exist without struggle and pain and anguish. And rather than being a noxious bloom or a weed planted by an enemy, the lifeblood of Jesus flows directly through our community's veins. And it has produced what you see in this room here and on Zoom. So we have learned a good many things in our journey towards now. And the most important thing is Religious faith should not be that hard, or I should say religion should not be that hard. As Jesus said, his burden should be light, should not be filled with rules and regulations. It was funny, before Mass, Anne and a group of us were talking about liturgists and how liturgists would not break the bread. We broke the bread prior to Mass. How somebody who follows the rules would not do what we did. So it's kind of funny that we had that conversation. It should not be filled with rules and regulations and caveats that regulate people into categories as if they were a seed catalog. It should not perpetuate hierarchies of power and systems of preference. It should not force a unity of belief because, as someone said last week after the homily, there exists a multitude of opinions about faith and God and the world. And I think that's true of any church, but they just don't talk about it and kind of give the impression that everybody thinks the same way. And we all know they don't. We've also learned to laugh even during liturgy as we try to relax into God's unconditional love. And we always welcome everyone, no matter what condition their condition is in. So despite what I just said, I would be remiss if I did not say that living a faithful life can be really hard. Following the gospel is hard. And community can be very, very hard, as I mentioned with the Church of the Beatitudes. When folks have a voice, they use it to speak up and out, sometimes saying things that we might not disagree or appreciate. However, the Apostle Paul wisely exhorted us to bear with one another. And bearing with one another is another name for tolerance. And as you all know, tolerance involves compromise. And while some might regard compromise as a dirty word, it is critical to the survival of relationships. And it is probably one of the most difficult things that we will ever do in our lives. So unfortunately, some of our members left because they felt that our communal tolerance did not respect their own deeply held beliefs. And this type of leave taking is painful for everyone. But as I look back at the last 16 years, folks are always coming and going to St. Mary Magdalene. You might have noticed that a good number of the founders that Carol mentioned last week no longer worship with us. They might be on our e-group, but they no longer worship with us. And I could be wrong, but I like to think, as I said, that we are an oasis for searchers and believers in crisis. And this means different things to different people. So some of us find our niche and we never leave. Others spend varying amounts of time with us, sharing their gifts and eating and drinking their fill. And then for whatever personal reasons, they pack their bags with what they have learned and they move on to something that is different, but something that makes them feel peaceful and happier and more fruitful. And hopefully all who have walked through our doors know that they not only remain on our email list, they also remain in our hearts. And we always leave the lights on for them. So despite our many warts and our mistakes and missteps, we have tried our very best in the last 16 years to make St. Mary Magdalene a place where everyone has a purpose, everyone has a role, a place where people are free to be whoever they are, a place to love whoever they are called to love, a safe place to grow and change, a safe place to question and speak up without fear, a safe place to dream God's dream anew. And all of the places that those voices and those dreams have taken us, but one place it has not taken us is to hell. And so, my sisters and brothers, we come here each week together, just as we are, broken but blessed, poured and flowing, on our good days and on our bad, in sad times and on happy days. And we come here because we want to be transformed into what Jesus wants us to be, his body and his blood for the life of the world.